I was born in 1961 in Phoenix, Arizona, to a white middle-class Jewish family of Ashkenazi descent. My grandparents were immigrants from Poland and Russia and Romania. And by the time I was about 5 or 6 years old, I began to notice some differences between myself and my relatives. And when I say relatives, I mean all of them. My parents, my brother, aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents. One of the first things I noticed was my hair. I have very fine, thin, straight hair, what I call cheap hair. All of my relatives had either wavy, curly, super curly, or frizzy hair. All of my relatives also had brown hair, dark brown hair, almost black hair, and I was born a towhead. So I started asking my mom if I was adopted, and I'd asked her more than once, but I remember one morning she was making lunch before school for my brother and I asked her again, Mom, was I adopted? And in the most loving, kind tone, she said, no, honey, you were not adopted. She said, I remember the day you were born and they laid you across my belly and they told me you were a girl and I fell in love with you. And she said, and when they told your dad that you were 9 pounds, 3 ounces, he asked the doctor if you were going to be obese. So that sounded like a pretty good birth story and I stuck with it for a while. But by the time I was about 13, those differences continued to emerge. I noticed eye color. My relatives all had various shades of brown, few blue-eyed people from Russia, and my eyes are green. I noticed that the shape of my body was different. The women in my family had long, lean, beautiful legs, and I'm curvy. I've got thighs, hips, a bubble butt. Didn't like those compared to the other women in my family. And it wasn't just physical. One example is I was really good at math. They said they couldn't measure my aptitude in math when I was in 6th grade, and I skipped 8th grade math completely, and I loved math. Nobody in my family even came close to fitting that profile. So by then I knew how babies were made. And so my question changed, and sort of in a flippant tone, I recall one time just saying to my mom, all right, Mom, was it the mailman? Was it the milkman? Because, they were all men back then. She just said no. There was no tenderness to that voice. When I was 35 in 1996, I was having lunch with my father. And we were just chatting, and we were on the topic of relationships. And really, for no particular reason, I just said, Dad, have you ever cheated before? And he said, no, I'm a one-woman kind of guy. And he said, but your mom cheated once. So I thought, okay, didn't really seem to amount to much. I didn't judge her. She'd had a tough life. And I just thought, okay, nothing I really need to know about. About a year went by. We were having lunch again, my father and I. And it occurred to me to ask him when that affair happened. So I did. And I said, was that when I was 10? Was that what caused the divorce? And he said, no. He said, it was really shortly after your brother died. I had a brother who drowned when he was 4 years old, and his name was Mark. And so I knew the pain that comes from the loss of a child in a family. And so when he told me that, I thought, okay, maybe that makes sense. Maybe she was just in her sorrow and grief, an affair happened. A few more months went by, and I was talking to her on a normal Sunday afternoon. She was in Kansas City and I was in Tucson, and it was just a normal conversation. And she started going off on a rant. And she said, your uncle is just the biggest liar. He's a compulsive liar. He's a pathological liar. And he's going to teach his daughter to be a liar. And all of a sudden, my heart started racing. And I felt these unprepared words, unrehearsed, wasn't ready to ask them that day, started to come out. And I said, while we're on the subject of lying, Mom, Dad told me that you had an affair years ago. And I don't care. I don't judge you. It's fine. I don't even really want to know about it unless I'm related to that man. And if I'm related to that man, I need to know. It was in the pregnant pause that followed that my world fell apart. And she said, I'm not ready to talk to you about it right now. And I said, you just answered my question. I could never have anticipated the absolute devastation that I felt. I spent the next few days wandering around my house, not eating, not sleeping. And I remember just even looking at my arms and thinking, whose arms are these? Whose hands are these? And I realized it wasn't that I felt like a lie had been told to me. I felt that I actually was the lie. My mom passed 6 months after that. And in that space, she shared with me everything she knew about him. She told me he was from the deep South, from Mobile, Alabama. He was born in the 1930s, early 1930s. He had met me. He did know about me. Last time he saw me, I was 2. And he was an engineer. And he has an impossibly common name. So I knew I was going to start searching. And back then, there was not the search engines. There was no 23andMe or, been verified. We just didn't have the tools back then to do it all on the internet the way we do now. So I contacted a detective, and he said it would be incredibly expensive because he'd have to go to Mobile, etc. So that wasn't going to work. A friend of mine told me she knew a psychic, and so I talked to her, and really that didn't come to fruition. So I knew I was just going to keep looking, and there were some things I really wanted to find. I wanted to know if I had siblings. I wanted to know my medical history, and I wanted to know my story, because the story that I believed to be true wasn't true anymore. And more than anything, I wanted to see a photo of someone who I looked like. Also, as I looked, I was afraid of a few things. I was afraid that I would disrupt a family, that I would pop out of nowhere and it would cause pain to another family. And so I knew I had to proceed with compassion and kindness. And I also had to allow that to be their story if that's what took place. I was afraid that he might be a really bad guy. And I was also afraid that I might actually find him and he would be on the other end of the phone and he would deny it. About 10 years into looking, I decided I really needed to come to peace with the idea that I would never find him. So I told myself that if I never find him, then not finding him will be my story. But I continued looking. Some days I would spend 8 hours on the computer, and then months would go by before I would look again. It was always the same process. I would follow a little lead that would lead to a little something else, and just this windy rabbit hole. And it would end in one of two places. I would either hit a wall where it was clear it wasn't the right person, or it would hit a maybe, a phone number, an email, and I would do a cold call. And nothing happened for years and years. And then on August 1st, 2017, my dad's birthday, the dad who raised me, I followed yet another lead. And it led to a woman who may or may not have been related to a man with that name. And there was another woman who was close to my age, may or may not have been her daughter. And it just kind of seemed like some things were sort of lining up. I hadn't hit that wall yet. And the daughter had a pretty good digital footprint. I found her on LinkedIn. I found her on Facebook messaging. And so I sent out this blitz, like 2 or 3 different places. And I said basically the same thing, really minimal information. I didn't say why I was looking for him, just that I was looking for him. And like hundreds of times before, I walked away. But this time, about 20 minutes went by and the phone rang, and it was her. And she asked me why I was looking for him. Fair enough question. And I said, because I'm related to him. And then I filled in some of the rest of it. I told more information that I had as quickly as I could. And then she said, how are you related to him? And I had to take pause because this was the moment. And I said, I'm his daughter. And she said, you found the man you've been looking for. I never could have imagined the minutes, hours, days, months, and now years that would follow that phone call. Not only did I find him, but I found an amazing, loving, open-hearted family. By later on that evening, he and I began our email correspondence. And right away, he said to me, you have not disrupted this family. I will answer any question that you have. And he said, I knew if you had your mother's tenacity that you would find me. I've been waiting for you all these years. Since then, I have visited him for Father's Day, for his birthday, and most recently, I visited him for my birthday, the first birthday he and I spent together in my life. And the last night I was there, we were sitting in the office, and I just said, Dad, you could have not, opened the door to me. I mean, you invited me into your family, you invited me into your life, you invited me into your heart, and you didn't have to do that. And I can never thank you enough. And he said, the door was never closed to you.